Scooby-Doo,
2019 marks 50 years since the premiere of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? In terms of longevity, this series was easily the high-water mark of Hanna-Barbera's output. Some might argue that Johnny Quest was the best thing the studio ever developed, and while the super science adventures of the preteen boy and his entourage is indeed the better written and produced show, the sheer volume of derivative works based on the Scooby Gang is a clear indication that the cowardly dog and his mystery-solving teenage friends struck a nerve in the public psyche that the brave bandit and his child companions couldn't. Of the numerous adaptations, spin-offs, and reimaginings of the original 1969 series, it is unlikely that any will ever surpass the television masterpiece that is Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, a 52-episode series that ran from 2010 to 2013 on Cartoon Network. Not only is Mystery Inc. the best Scooby series, it's one of the best US animated shows, period, and deserves to be counted among giants as Batman the Animated Series and Avatar The Last Airbender. As with those two shows, not only does Mystery Inc. directly appeal to adult audiences, but it proves how a series, regardless of whether live action or animated, can have a compelling story and engaging characters. Indeed, when a cartoon like The Simpsons can end up as the longest-running primetime scripted series of all time, we should be long past thinking that TV animation is just for children. Here are 9 reasons why Mystery Incorporated deserves to be considered the best Scooby-Doo series ever. Mystery Incorporated is set in the fictional town of Crystal Cove, rather than the other established Scooby locations like Coolsville or the inside of the Nomadic Mystery Machine. This version of the Scooby Gang remains in high school, yet still spends most of its time solving mysteries, much to the consternation of their parents and the town's 2 main authority figures, Fred's father, Mayor Fred Jones Sr., and Sheriff Bronson Stone. As the town relies on tourism dollars generated by Crystal Cove's reputation as a haven for the supernatural, they get irritated that each successfully solved mystery means one less attraction and source of income for the town.
Guess we owe you kids thanks. You did save the bank. Although you also lost the town a serious revenue stream. A stream of revenue!
Unlike every other Scooby series that came before, Mystery Inc. has an overarching story, primarily unraveling the mystery of Crystal Cove itself. And also unlike previous iterations of the show, Mystery Inc. features a large assortment of recurring characters, including the gang's parents, fellow students, helpful adults, and villains. In many ways, Mystery Inc. is a lot like The X-Files. In that show, most episodes found Fox and Scully investigating a monster of the week, yet the series would still find time to probe Fox's missing sister or Scully's pregnancy, all while under surveillance by the cigarette-smoking man. In Mystery Inc., episodes usually find the Scooby Gang pursuing whatever villain is currently plaguing Crystal Cove, while the anonymous Mr. E feeds them clues for his own nefarious purposes. For those who've never watched Mystery Inc., it's easy to dismiss it as just another Scooby series. After all, there have been well over a dozen different versions since 1969 with some wildly different premises. The voice actors have been replaced several times, and the animation style has varied greatly. Even the character models have changed. One aspect that remained steady through the years, however, was each principal character's core dynamic. Scooby and Shaggy have always been cowardly gluttons. Velma has always been the stuck-up know-it-all, and Fred, the gung-ho leader who makes all the decisions. Daphne has always been the cute one who worried about her hair and screwed up the traps. The 1960s. With a few minor exceptions, like how Scooby and Shaggy became vegetarians for a while, These primary traits remain steady for each member of the Scooby Gang in almost every series until the Scooby Renaissance of the late 1990s that began with Zombie Island. But films like that were the exception, and the television series mostly remained true to the established characters. Anything beyond that was usually up to fan speculation or spoofs, like Fred and Daphne being an item, or questions about Velma's sexuality. Then came Mystery Incorporated. While the show didn't diverge too much from the established traits, each character was still fleshed out in greater detail than ever before. Scooby and Shaggy may have grown the least in Mystery Inc., possibly due to having been the primary focus in most previous series and thus already experiencing plenty of character development. While remaining cowardly gluttons, they do have their moments, like Scooby showing occasional backbone.
"We'll be coming for you, or my name isn't Scooby-Doo,"
and Shaggy experiencing multiple romantic interests. Velma remains aloof throughout most of Mystery Inc., to the point of having an almost complete acerbic personality.
I know a place you can put another parking meter.
Ghost truck!
Before you go all code brown, think. The ghost trucker hasn't seen us yet.
It's still not working. What if their minds are permanently gone?
How would we know?
Velma.
Dude, not cool.
In fact, in some ways, this version of Velma is the most unpleasant she's ever been. She doesn't care that her attitude is hurting her family's business. While dating Shaggy, she makes attempts to fix him, such as pressuring him to drop the word "like" from his speech or altering his clothing choices. She even betrays the gang by secretly working with one of the series' antagonists. Being able to dislike Velma is encouraging, however, because it means she's finally been allowed to evolve as a character instead of simply being the boyish girl with glasses who smugly unmasks the villains. In Mystery Inc., Daphne is still the good-looking rich girl. But this time, the series explores the ramifications of someone with her affluent upbringing hanging around her middle-class peers, engaging in dangerous detective work. She pines for the single-minded and romantically clueless Fred, and we can infer that her crush on him may be the reason she puts up with the occasional humiliating aspects of mystery solving, especially since she briefly drops out of the gang entirely after abandoning Fred for a Hollywood hunk. Despite traditionally being the most bland and forgettable character in the history of the franchise, Fred may be the one who experiences the most development in the entire run of Mystery Inc. He starts out being cheerfully obtuse, with a single-minded devotion to traps and solving mysteries, but during the course of the series, Fred gains and loses Daphne as a fiancé, discovers the only father he ever knew was not only a villain, but also not his real father, and finds his real parents, only to have them turn out to be henchmen of the series' main antagonist, and worse than the fake father who raised him. The result of these revelations has an actual impact on Fred's life, turning him into a broken man who has to fight his way back to any semblance of normalcy. Unlike most of the previous series, each human member of the gang has parents, or a parental equivalent, in their lives. However, their parents are just the worst. All of them are self-absorbed and openly hostile toward the gang's mystery solving, though Velma's parents are the least terrible, despite having once left their daughter stranded overnight in an abandoned town overrun by monsters. Shaggy's parents refuse to listen to their son, and not only ship him off to military school, but they even send Scooby away to a prison farm, complete with electric fences, guard towers with spotlights, and a farmer who literally shoots at escaping dogs. Daphne's parents are the stereotypical rich family obsessed with their image. Her sisters are equally self-absorbed overachievers. They look at Daphne's affection for Fred as beneath her status, especially considering his obsession with traps and mysteries. Fred's parenting is the most complex. Raised and named after the town's mayor, Fred Jones Sr., and believing his mother had long since passed away, Fred was devastated to learn this was all a lie, and he had been left as a child in the hands of a villain by his real parents, Brad Childs and Judy Reeves, international jet-setters and members of the previous incarnation of Mystery Inc. While it was stated that Mayor Jones, in his identity as the Freak of Crystal Cove, threatened to harm Fred if his parents didn't leave town, it can be inferred from later events that they were more than happy with the arrangement. I can't help but wonder if there had been a moment when Mayor Jones, thinking how clever he'd been as he smugly watched Brad and Judy leave, glanced down at the baby in his arms, and only then realizing that he just became responsible for raising a child that wasn't even his for the next 2 decades. Despite being a cartoon created with children in mind, the original Scooby-Doo Where Are You had its fair share of intense moments. For example, that guy still almost makes me shit myself. As the Scooby-Doo franchise progressed, the original premise of a teenage gang finding themselves in spooky and dangerous situations quickly devolved into mostly kid-friendly fare to the point that even actual supernatural monsters were childlike and harmless. This went on for over 2 decades until Zombie Island briefly established a more mature tone. Zombie Island was immediately followed by the almost equally as serious Witch's Ghost, but despite the 2 films' critical and financial success, the studio almost immediately reverted back to the more kid-friendly stuff of previous Scooby incarnations. This trend lasted for almost another decade until Mystery Inc. brought back the maturity of adult situations and even murder. Yes, Mystery Inc. had a body count. While the conclusion of the series did feature a reset that erased all the bad things that ever happened in or around Crystal Cove, this doesn't change the fact that 3 people were killed by the series' principal antagonist, the evil owl, Professor Pericles. The first murder victim was Mr. E's henchman, Ed Machine. His last appearance sees him being set upon by Professor Pericles as his screams echo inside his house. While ambiguous, his death was later confirmed by one of the creators. The second murder victim was Angel Dynamite, aka Cassidy Williams, who died during an underwater explosion set by Professor Pericles. Like the previous killing, her death was off-screen, but accepted as canon, and until the final episode reset, she never came back again. The final murder victim was Hot Dog Water, killed by robots controlled by Professor Pericles. Like the first 2, this murder was off-screen, but shockingly, we hear the machine gun fire that kills her.
Come on, Scooby. We have to keep going.
The final episodes also feature the wholesale slaughter of most of Crystal Cove, consumed by the evil entity after absorbing Professor Pericles. However, the gang defeats the entity shortly after this and resets their universe, making the impact of these deaths feel less intense than the earlier, more intimate murders. Sexuality between the members of the Scooby Gang is finally officially explored, whether it's Daphne desperately trying to get with the clueless Fred, or Velma pursuing an ultimately failed relationship with Shaggy. It can also be inferred that after years of fan speculation, Velma may have ended up in a same-sex relationship at the end of the series.
That's my girl.
Another more subtle aspect of Mystery Inc. that drives home the adult feel of the show is how many of the actions of the gang have ramifications. For example, in one episode, they defeat a mutated herd of cattle threatening Crystal Cove by luring the creatures into the sea, only to watch the herd safely swim away. While the danger facing Crystal Cove was sorted out, all the gang really did was pass the danger on to another community somewhere else, which makes them uneasy and they agree not to talk about it. In addition, in that same episode, a character falls from a significant height, and instead of walking around in the next scene as if nothing had happened, actually winds up hospitalized in a coma. A good sign of whether or not the creators of any property care about what they're doing is how well they pay attention to story continuity. Some would argue that inconsistencies in a TV series are unimportant as long as the story is engaging. Others would say that it's jarring for viewers having to reconcile contradicting established facts in a show's timeline. Perhaps it's just normal for non-dramatic series to simply ignore continuity. A prime example of this is the classic British comedy sci-fi series Red Dwarf. That show is notorious when it comes to continuity, whether it's how many people crew the eponymous spaceship, stated to be anywhere from 169 to 11,169, to the relationship between Dave Lister and Christine Kochanski. The two went from Lister having an unrequited crush on the communication officer in the first few seasons, to them having been ex-lovers later on when Kochanski was played by a different actress. Perhaps its most infamous continuity error was how an early episode contained a throwaway joke establishing that both Lister and Arnold Rimmer had their appendixes removed, while an episode in a later season featured Lister having his appendix removed again on camera. These errors illustrate three common forms of inconsistencies and why they occur. A wildly diverging crew count is indicative of sloppy writing. A massive shift in established history often signals a clumsy attempt at changing character motivations, and the two appendixes flub is common in comedies where the joke is more important than any established continuity. With Mystery Inc., however, the creators did their best to establish a well-organized timeline, and this further emphasizes the care they took with the show. Unlike early series, where each member of the gang seemed to have at least a dozen uncles each, and they couldn't even lock down whether Scooby-Doo was a cousin or brother, family members in Mystery Inc. remain constant. Villains make repeat appearances, and even chip in to help the Scooby Gang in a later episode. There's even an amusing running gag at the beginning of the second season where, after having been forced to get a crew cut from military school, Shaggy's hair gradually, and humiliatingly, grows back over the course of a few episodes. Fans pick up on attention to detail, and regardless if those details are important to the story, they are important in establishing the universe in which the story is set, and bad continuity can absolutely distract the viewer enough to lessen their enjoyment of the show. In many ways, Mystery Inc. was a love letter to the Scooby series that came before, and this may be best expressed by just how many references to them are scattered throughout. The original voice of Shaggy, Casey Kasem, guest stars as Shaggy's father, while fan favorites from Witch's Ghost, the Hex Girls, make 2 appearances. Vincent Van Gool from 13 Ghosts shows up several times throughout Mystery Inc., although in this incarnation he is not an all-powerful warlock, but instead the hammy has-been actor on which he was originally based and voiced, Vincent Price. In Mystery Inc., he's played by the incomparable Maurice LaMarche, whose depiction of the late great horror actor gives his better-known pitch-perfect Orson Welles impression a real run for its money.
Yes, rosebud frozen peas, full of country goodness and green penis. Wait, that's terrible. I quit. Just a handful for the road. Oh, what luck. There's a French fry stuck in my beard.
The references start early in Mystery Inc., with the very first episode itself blatantly calling back to Where Are You? By having Velma lead a tour of her parents' museum featuring the costumes of several defeated villains of the past. Hidden in the audience here, and elsewhere throughout the series, you'll find some familiar faces. These cameos make for fun viewing, turning almost every crowd scene into a Scooby-Doo version of Where's Waldo. He Who Must Not Be Named also briefly appears, but the less said about that, the better. Mystery Inc. features the best voice cast ever assembled for a Scooby series. the great Frank Welker returns once again to voice Fred, as well as Scooby-Doo himself, a role he took over in 2003 after a couple of other actors handled the part following the death of the original voice of Scooby, Don Messick. Grey Griffin returns as Daphne, who she's played consistently and made her own since taking over from the late Mary Kay Bergman in 2001. Velma is once again played by Mindy Cohn, best known for her role as Natalie on The Facts of Life. Cohn played Velma in almost every Scooby incarnation from 2002 until retiring in 2015. After having played Shaggy in both theatrical live-action films, Matthew Lillard took over the role of the animated Shaggy upon Casey Kasem's retirement back in 2009. While Billy West and Scott Innes, who played the character in the Zombie Island-era direct-to-video releases, did passable jobs, and Billy West is just the best. They never captured the feel of Kasem's original Shaggy as much as Lillard has. In addition to the established Scooby voices, several respected actors and comedians not known for voice work performed, such as Louis Black as Mr. E, Udo Kier as Professor Pericles, and Vivica Fox as Angel Dynamite aka Cassidy Williams. Linda Cardellini, who played Velma in the first two live-action films, reunites with her co-star Matthew Lillard as Hot Dog Water. Gary Cole and Patrick Warburton's unique vocal talents round out the principal cast as Mayor Jones and Sheriff Stone, respectively. Callbacks to earlier Scooby series and films weren't enough for the creators of Mystery Inc., and they scattered pop culture references throughout each episode, further emphasizing the more adult leanings of the series. National Lampoon's Vacation is considered by many to be one of the greatest comedies of all time. The film centers on the hapless Clark Griswold as he tries to provide his long-suffering wife Ellen and his children a memorable cross-country road trip to a popular amusement park. Does the station wagon in this scene from Season 1's The Creeping Creatures look familiar? How about that butt chin? This family clearly references the Griswolds, including the fact that the mother here is voiced by Ellen Griswold herself, Beverly D'Angelo. The 9th episode of Season 1, Battle of the Humongonauts, is a clear homage to Toho's 1966 kaiju film, War of the Gargantuas. Not only do both productions feature two giant monsters, one green and one brown, the episode also features a version of the film's song, The Words Get Stuck in My Throat. Yeah, the words may get stuck in her throat, but that song is going to be stuck in your head after watching this episode.
A beginning is a very delicate time.
A beginning is a delicate time indeed, especially for the series finale, which began with Nova here doing her best Princess Irulan impression from David Lynch's 1984 film, Dune. As we'll see later, this wasn't the only time David Lynch showed up in Mystery Inc.
This guy here's my employer, Mr. Sternum, a self-made trap gazillionaire. This lady here is Mrs. S. She's an absolute knockout. That handsome guy there is me. My name is Thraxy. I watch out for the both of them, which is a really tough job. Because when they got together, it was trapping time.
The quick sequence showcasing the lives of Fred's real parents as jet-setting mystery solvers is no mystery to anyone who remembers the classic 1980s TV romantic adventure series, Heart to Heart. Heart to heart, sternum to sternum, heart, sternum, get it? Yeah, not every joke lands successfully. Perhaps where the brilliance of the Mystery Inc. creators shines the most is in their clever use of guest roles. Deserving to be at the very top of the list is the late great writer Harlan Ellison. While not exactly a household name, Ellison was a beloved titan in the world of science fiction. known equally for fertile imagination that resulted in arguably the most acclaimed episode of the original Star Trek, as well as a cantankerousness when he felt his work wasn't treated with the respect it deserved, like in the case of the most acclaimed episode of the original Star Trek. Ellison even managed to snag an odd credit in later releases of the original Terminator film after it came to light that James Cameron likely ripped off some ideas from the author. Ellison appeared as himself in 2 episodes of Mystery Inc., Season 1's The Shrieking Madness, and the series finale, Come Undone, where he ends up being the catalyst for the gang's trek around the world solving mysteries, retconning the events of Mystery Inc. as a prequel to Where Are You? Speaking of writers, in the same episode that first featured Harlan Ellison, another author was also prominently shown, H.P. Hatecraft. While easy to dismiss Hatecraft as a ridiculously transparent allusion to famed Gothic horror author H.P. Lovecraft, the real brilliance behind this silly character is who the producers hired to voice him, Jeffrey Combs. Despite an acting career mainly comprised of secondary or smaller roles, Combs occasionally played the lead, including in several movies based on or inspired by H.P. Lovecraft stories. Films like Reanimator, From Beyond, and The Dunwich Horror helped cement Combs' reputation as the go-to guy for portraying Lovecraftian characters, not to mention the film Necronomicon, where he played H.P. Lovecraft himself. It's just as well they focus strictly on Lovecraft's name and Gothic tendencies without touching on some of the more unpleasant aspects of his personality. Seriously, just Google what he named his cat. Harking back to the early days of Hanna-Barbera, Johnny Quest himself, Tim Matheson, played Fred's real father, Brad Childs, while the entire Johnny Quest cast made cameos as employees working for Mr. E's nefarious Destroido company. During Daphne and Fred's temporary breakup, she dated Hollywood heartthrob and eventual villain, Baylor Hotner, an obvious parody of the Twilight franchise's Taylor Lautner. As a child, Lautner himself voiced characters in 2 episodes of What's New, Scooby-Doo. In what could be the most obscure reference and missed not only by every child in the audience, but possibly many adult viewers as well, the odd sequence of the little man dancing in the Red Room in Season 1's Stand and Deliver is a reference to a similar scene in David Lynch's early 1990s cult TV series Twin Peaks. The little man, later known as Professor Horatio Caron, was voiced by the actual actor Michael J. Anderson, who played the little man in the Twin Peaks Red Room scene. If you haven't watched Mystery Inc., or if you're a longtime Scooby fan who can't accept a different take on the characters, I urge you to give this series a chance. At one time, it was available to stream on Netflix, but now it takes a subscription to Boomerang to watch it. It can also be purchased on DVD or digitally on Vudu and other comparable sites. While Mystery Inc. is obviously my favorite of all the Scooby series, it does remain a bit controversial with some fans who are upset with the more adult treatment of their beloved characters. As is the case with any reimagining, it's easy for the creators to go the lazy route and either keep the characters the same and rest on the laurels of previous incarnations, or worse, they'll add a gimmick to cynically try and appeal to a new audience. It's usually easy to tell when that's the case, especially when the gimmick takes the form of a child version of the main star. But on rare occasions, a series comes along that was developed by real fans of the original, and the love of the show comes through in the attention to detail and the respect given. Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated is one of those rare sequels that far surpass the original, as long as the viewer remains willing to accept a divergence from what came before.